Wind rushes past, violent and unrelenting, stealing the air, your scream from your lungs. It howls in your ears, a deafening roar that drowns out every other sound. The tearing metal, the distinct explosion, the final cries of strangers suspended in the sky. There is no comprehension of which way is up, which way is down. Only the sickening awareness of the fall. The ground below you feels impossibly far away, yet not quite far enough. It doesn't rise to meet you quickly. Instead, it waits, patient, inevitable. For those still conscious, for those who understand exactly what is happening, every second stretches thin and unbearable. 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes is an eternity when you know that you are going to die. In that suspended pocket of time, your mind races faster than your body falls. You think of the ordinary things, the text that you meant to send, the meeting you had scheduled for tomorrow, the suitcase waiting at the baggage claim, the plans you made for when the plane landed, the destination circled on your itinerary, the version of your future that existed just moments ago. And then the realization settles in with terrifying clarity. It isn't turbulence. This isn't a nightmare. This is something you will not wake up from. This is real. The fall is not graceful. It is chaotic, violent. Your body tumbles through the open sky, spiraling past jagged pieces of what was once the plane. Shards of metal catch the sunlight as they plummet alongside you. Smoke curls upwards from the explosion that seems just impossible. Around you, other figures fall, some silent, some thrashing. Tears stream from your eyes, ripped away instantly by the wind. The world blurs, the sky and the earth trade places over and over again. There is no control, no escape, only gravity. But this story, today, this story is about the one who hit the ground and lived. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. Hello. Welcome back. I am your host, Kayla. I hope you're having an amazing week. I hope something good has happened and something has made you smile and that you're able to share that happiness with the world around you. I don't have anything for this episode, so we're going to just get right into it. On January 25th, 1972, the day was like any other. Flight attendants were standing off to the side of the aisle in the empty rows, allowing passengers to filter in. They place their bags, they find their seats, and they get comfortable. The flight was gearing up for a short 2.5-hour flight from Stockholm, Sweden to Belgrade in Serbia, with 2 stops in between. First in Copenhagen in Denmark, and the second in Zagreb, Croatia. In Copenhagen, Yugoslav Airlines Flight 367 made its first layover, where they picked up more passengers and collected a secondary cabin crew, including Vesna Vulovic, who was actually not scheduled to be on Flight 367, but thanks to a mix-up in names, she ended up getting handed the wrong schedule, and she wound up on this flight anyways. She had been working as a flight attendant now for 8 months, and she was excited to be in Denmark because this was just not a place that she had been before. At 22 years old, Vesna had no plans of jumping from a plane. She didn't want to go skydiving or be a stunt artist. She simply wanted to show up to work as a flight attendant, do her job, and get to travel along the way. Vesna was born January 3rd, 1950 in the capital of Yugoslavia, which at the time was Belgrade. The city was in the process of rebuilding, kind of rebranding, if you will, after World War II. As you can imagine, things at this time were still a little bit tense. Vesna's father was a businessman and her mother worked as a fitness instructor, and they wanted more for their daughter, just like Vesna ended up desiring as she grew. She would end up going to school in the United Kingdom to learn a new language and a different culture and see more of the world. And when she returned home, she met up with a friend who happened to be working as a flight attendant. And Vesna sees her in uniform and she's like, I want that too. And this is what propelled her down the path for what she would become most famous for. When the flight landed in Denmark on January 25th, they had almost a full day layover, and it was during this time that she noticed people were kind of acting weird. Her colleagues didn't want to go sightseeing. They just wanted to go shopping and talk about their families and then return to their rooms. The pilot, Ludwig Rostri, locked himself in his room and he stayed there until it was time to board the next flight. The co-pilot, Rocco Mijeg, was talking about his children in complete adoration, and she just felt like everyone was operating with more anxiety than normal. Now, everyone being completely fine is kind of the norm, but it is also not unusual for someone to get a little nervous about a flight every now and then. But everyone seemed off. But there was an explanation for this. The following day, on January 26th, as the plane was loading, Vesna and the other attendants were keeping out for a man who, on the day before, as they were getting off of the plane, he was just kind of behaving super angry. He had been throwing a fit and behaving as if he was just really annoyed and no one could do anything right. And they all breathed a sigh of relief when he did not get back on board the plane. But that might have been on purpose, because this plane would never reach Zagreb. Between Zagreb and Copenhagen was Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic. In Czechoslovakia, which we're going to call it for this episode because that's the time frame that it was in Czechoslovakia, there was this vast snow-covered Elbe sandstone mountain range near the village of Srbska Kamenice. This village, the name of which I'm only going to say that one time, is on a scenic and vibrant area that is home to Bohemian Switzerland National Park and the Kamenetse River. Here in the summer, at least, it is perfect for hiking and biking. It is quiet and known for kind of a slower style of life. There are huge sandstone cliffs and rock formations, thick and vibrant forest, deep valleys. You can go rock climbing and hiking that leads to overlooks with views that feel like they just go on for miles. This is the only mountain range that they would be needing to fly over during this leg, and it became the perfect place for something outrageous to happen. The plane was taxied onto the runway and took off at 3:15 p.m., lifting the 27 passengers and crew members into the air. It was cold and overcast, completely normal for January, and the hum of the twin engines seemed to soothe everyone's nerves, even as the turbulence began to rock the plane just a bit. This was 1972, and regulations and safety of getting on a plane was much more lax than it is today. So when an event was triggered while the plane was cruising at the altitude of 33,000 feet, passengers and crew alike were completely unaware. 46 minutes after takeoff, at 4:01 p.m., as the plane flew over the Elbe Sandstone Mountains, a deafening boom echoed through the plane as a bomb detonated. Inside a briefcase in the luggage compartment, what is believed to have been a bomb planted by a Croatian nationalist group exploded, ripping the plane into 3 pieces in midair. The front 2 sections of the plane just completely broke and ripped apart, but the tail end stayed mostly intact. Now, very quickly, I want to circle back to this angry passenger who had been on the plane the day before. It is theorized that he was the one who planted the bomb. He had his ticket. He checked in, indicating that he was going to be on the flight. His luggage was put on the flight, and then he just never got on. So immediately upon the bomb going off, the cabin depressurized. Passengers, crew, luggage, gear, and everything on the plane was either killed instantly or sucked from the plane and into the open, frozen air 6.3 miles above ground. which is horrifying to think about. I actually, in my notes, I wrote horrifying, horrifying, horrifying. I couldn't really think of a good sentence to describe just how terrible these people had to have felt when they realized what was happening. When the bomb exploded, Vesna was inside the plane near the food cart in the tail of the plane. The force of the explosion caused the food cart to shift and it pinned her in place. As everyone and everything hurtled towards the ground at terminal velocity, thumps could be heard through the trees in the nearby village. In a miraculous turn of events, the tail of the plane collided with a thick, snowy slope at just the right angle to not produce deadly consequences. At 33,000 feet, the height at which the plane was flying, this is equivalent to free falling from Mount Everest peak. Only difference being that falling from a peak would mean that you're kind of at a stop or at a slow moving rate rather than the cruising speed of a Douglas DC-9, which is about 550 miles per hour. Every person on the plane died except for Vesna. To say that she is lucky is an understatement. Vesna doesn't remember the explosion or the fall or the landing. She had been knocked unconscious, likely from the depressurization of the cabin, and this absolutely helped play a role in saving her life. It is believed that due to Vesna having chronically low blood pressure, she passed out immediately upon the plane crashing or exploding. Studies show that people who are unconscious and therefore limp suffer from less impact-related injuries than those who stay conscious and brace for impact. It is believed that this helped to prevent any of her internal organs from suffering from an injury that would cause her to bleed out. And her blood pressure was actually so low that there was a question about whether she should have been a flight attendant at all. But when she went in for the health exam, she drank a ton of coffee to bring her blood pressure up so that way she wouldn't fail it. All that Vesna remembers is passengers coming on the plane and getting seated, and the next thing she remembers is waking up in the hospital bed with her mother at her side. The fact that she survived is thanks to several factors. First, that she was in a part of the plane that didn't fracture apart like the rest of it. Because of this, she was offered additional cushion for the landing and protection from the freezing temperatures. The tail of the plane then collided with trees skirting along them before hitting the snow-covered slope, offering, again, additional cushion from the fall, reducing the impact. Investigators also believe that the shape of the tail offered some resistance to the wind and air, reducing the speed of the fall just enough to not become deadly. Though she survived the fall, she had catastrophic injuries. She had several internal injuries due to the impact. She broke both of her legs, shattered her pelvis, broke several ribs, crushed 3 vertebrae in her spine, which left her paralyzed from the waist down, and fractured a skull. By sheer determination alone, she clung to life. Though based on the experience she had, she probably for some moments wished that she had not survived. So inside the plane, hours later, in the dark, a local by the name of Bruno Honk heard someone screaming. As he tracked down the noise, he found Vesna inside the wreckage still, and she was in desperate need of help, but he knew exactly what to do. When he found her, she was still pinned by the food cart and covered in blood in the freezing cold. When he first saw her, all that he could see were her legs sticking out from the fuselage, and he was smart, and instead of trying to pull her out by her legs, he started to remove the debris that was on top of her. Bruno had been a World War II medic. He gave her his coat to wrap up in and was able to provide her with first aid that saved her life before search and rescue even got there. Surrounding them were pieces of the plane, crumpled and jagged. Bodies were strewn about for miles of land, and the devastating sight stopped most of the rescuers in their tracks. They looked around. They saw what was a huge and horrifying crime scene, and then they put their heads down and got to work. Vesna was taken to the hospital where she slipped into a coma for 27 days. But when she came out of the coma, the hard work began. She went through 10 months of rehabilitation where she thankfully found that the paralysis was only temporary And then she went through the long process of learning to walk again, though with a permanent limp. And this was due to the twist in her spine from the damage done that was never going to be straightened out. While she was in the coma, doctors prepared her parents that she may never wake up. But then when she did wake, they told her that she may never walk. Yet she did. She defied odd after odd, and her parents were backing her up the whole way. They actually sold both of their vehicles in order to pay for Vesna's medical care, which, imagine that. I'm going to assume that they didn't have brand new vehicles, but I don't know. I can't say for sure. But even if they did, healthcare that cost the same essentially as 2 vehicles, a 27-day coma, and 10 months of rehabilitation for the price of 2 vehicles. What a different world. But different world it definitely was, because this was not the only explosion that occurred on January 26th, 1972. Another bomb detonated on a train that was on its way to Zagreb from Vienna, Austria, where 6 people were injured. So this seemed to be a little bit of a planned, maybe coordinated effort. Despite that the bomb was planted in Copenhagen, they knew who the passengers were on the plane. And the following day, a phone call came in that was apparently from the Croatian ultranationalist terrorist group who was taking credit for the bombings. No arrests were ever made. In the 20 years that Croatia nationalists were attacking Yugoslavia, 128 terrorist attacks took place, most of which were by bombing. Besides the facts discovered during the investigation, not everyone believes the plausibility of the events, which of course leads down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. The most popular is that the plane did not crack apart due to a bomb exploding, but rather the Czechoslovak Air Force, who deployed anti-air missiles to shoot down the plane after mistaking it as a threat. It is believed that when this happened, the plane was flying at 2,600 feet or 800 meters. This idea came from 2 Prague journalists named Peter Hornung and Pavel Theiner, after they gained access to some secret documents from the Czech Civil Aviation Authority, which they believe the Czechoslovak government tried to cover up the mistaken identity blowing up of a plane. The claim, though, has been considered over the years, and based on the plane's altitude, the speed at which it was flying, the wind direction, kind of all of these other factors being taken into consideration, the only explanation for how the plane landed and how it broke apart and how just purely devastating it was that something happened high up in the air, such as a bomb in the luggage compartment beneath the plane going off. When the black box data from the plane was scrutinized, though, through an investigation, it was discovered that she fell from the tallest height without a parachute and survived, granting her a Guinness World Record. This, I guess I will call it an award, a certificate, I guess, was given to her in 1985. She was presented the certificate from Paul McCartney, which was kind of a full circle moment for her because she was a huge fan of the Beatles, and her friends growing up, they listened to the Beatles all the time. So this was just a really special moment for her. After all of this happened and she gained a ton of notoriety for surviving this fall, she became a bit of a national icon in her home country of Yugoslavia. The then president, Josip Broz Tito, honored her, and the Serbian folk singer by the name of Miroslav Ilic wrote a song called Vesna Vulovic. Hang with me with that pronunciation. I don't know that it's actually correct, but this roughly translates to Vesna the stewardess, which, again, roughly translating the lyrics reads, "On a plane in the middle of the sky, a girl sitting next to me. More beautiful than a dream, gentler than the sky, it's Vesna the flight attendant. Vesna, Vesna, stewardess, she captured my heart. I fly high, I fly with her. She was my love. In a blue uniform, like a fairy from a fairy tale, you won me over with your smile. The most beautiful flight attendant. And as the plane lands, in my heart, sadness remains. Will I meet her again? Vesna, my stewardess." Again, Rough translation, thanks to Google Translate, which I think the lyrics are interesting because she was kind of becoming knowable in a way. Wherever she flew, anywhere that somebody recognized her, people just wanted to sit next to her, though she never worked as a flight attendant again. Instead of returning to her job on the plane, she returned to the same company, but working behind a desk instead. In 1977, she got married to Nikola Brejka, who was a mechanical engineer, but they divorced in the early 1990s, contributing the decline of their relationship to a combination of survivor's guilt and an extreme form of PTSD and her chain smoking habit. So as we can imagine, Vesna was directly impacted by political attacks or politically driven attacks. She began to campaign for political causes, where she notably protested against the 1990s Serbia president Slobodan Milosevic, and then pursuing the campaign for the liberal forces in elections. This activity would end up getting her fired from her role with Jet Airlines. She was not arrested, likely due to how well known she had become from surviving this fall. And not only that, but the president that she was actively opposing ended up being tried for crimes against humanity. When asked about her political activity, she always commented along the lines of, quote, "But if nationalist forces in this country prevail, my heart will burst." For over 20 years, Vesna fought nationalism within her country and later advocating for peace within the Balkans. She was well known enough that smear campaigns were run against her stance, saying that she hadn't survived a fall from the height that she claimed, which, again, we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a minute. She was rooting for the Democratic Party and advocated for the integration of Serbia with the European Union. Her resilience and grace and ability to connect with others inspired many around her to create lifelong friendships. On December 23rd, 2016, at the age of 66, Vesna was found by her friends in her apartment after not responding to them for some time. She had been really good about calling people back if she didn't pick up her phone immediately, so this was a little bit of a red flag to her friends. A locksmith had to be called to open her door, and when they finally stepped inside, they found that she had passed away. She had been having some heart-related problems, and while the cause of death was never released, it can be guessed that her heart was at least a minimum contributing factor. 54 years later, Vesna is still talked about today. How incredible it was that she cheated death in a way by being in the exact right place at the right time in the right position. How she was lucky enough to have a medical condition that prevented her from remembering her trauma, and how a trained medic was the first person to find her. The trees and the snow cushioned the blow, and then she didn't just simply exist afterwards. She survived. She thrived. She used her voice to do something, to speak for something that she stood for and believed in. She survived the fall, the impact, blood loss, extreme pain, low blood pressure, hypothermic conditions, and somehow she made it out relatively unscathed. Her story is an example of how tragic events can become the moments that define the rest of our lives, not by what you survive, but what you do with that life afterwards. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying listening to Tragedy with a View, please consider leaving a review or rating on whatever platform you listen. Your feedback means so much to me, as it will allow me to continue to improve what I am bringing you, how I go about my storytelling, and it also helps continue this podcast to gain visibility. Please feel free to reach out to me with any thoughts, story ideas, suggestions, or topics that you would like me to bring to your ears through email at tragedywithaview@gmail.com or on Instagram at tragedywithaview. Thank you for your support. I am truly honored to have you here. We will talk again next week. Oh, and before I forget, sources for this episode included BBC.com, TheGuardian.com, The Independent, The Toronto Star, South Florida Sun, Sentinel, GuinnessWorldRecords.com, Wikipedia, ScienceOfFalling.com, Pam Pam City, Bygonely.com, CBC Radio, and Serbia Times. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. We will talk again. Bye.